Get ready for an electrifying night of classical music as the Wisconsin Chamber Orchestra presents Schumann in Spring. Guest pianist Ying Li brings power and elegance to Schumann's Piano Concerto in A minor. The night closes with Beethoven's Symphony No. 4, often dubbed the cheerful sibling to his more dramatic symphonies. Join the WCO on Friday, April 17th at 7:30 p.m. Tickets are available at wcoconcerts.org/spring. Earth Day is coming up, so there's no better time to shop at St. Vinny's for quality clothing, furniture, and home goods. April is Earth Month, and thrifting is both cheaper and eco-friendly. Good for the planet, good for your wallet. Plus, when you shop at St. Vinny's, you support local. All dollars spent at St. Vinny's stays in Dane County. Proceeds go to local food pantries, pharmacies, microloans, housing support, and more. Follow at Vinny's Dane County on Facebook and Instagram to be notified about special events coming up or to see the latest finds in store. This is CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Today, before we get into the conversation, I've got a big announcement. It's the first day of our spring membership campaign. This is the best time to become a CityCast Madison neighbor. If you don't know, neighbors get access to our ad-free podcast and bonus content, plus exclusive invites to neighbors-only events, which are downright delightful, like our recent craft night at Imaginary Factory. It's a lot of fun. Plus, you support the show and our team, and that's only for $10 a month. In addition to joining our neighbor community and getting the perks, we have something very special for neighbors who join during this campaign. Drum roll. A custom Madison pennant developed in partnership with Oxford Pennant. You know those tapering triangular flags that often sport your favorite team or favorite insignia like an alma mater, the things that you can put up on your wall. Yeah, Oxford makes the most beautiful felt wool pennants, and now they've made one for us, for our city, as a celebration of everything we love about Madison. The color is CityCast Madison Blue, has our city name, 2 flamingos, and says, "I live here on purpose," because we do. These pennants are American-made, and we designed them for you so that when you sign up to support our work, you get this one-of-a-kind token of local pride. Who doesn't love that? All right, y'all, together, we're making the city better, and I'm going to put mine up in my office or somewhere in my house that's easily clocked by visitors. Claim your pennant. Join us at membership.citycast.fm/Madison. That's membership.citycast.fm/Madison. It's truly a great time to become a CityCast Madison neighbor. Again, for just $10 a month or $100 a year, you can support CityCast Madison and all that we do. And you know what? A massive part of our mission is supporting and uplifting the incredible work of other journalistic outlets here in Madison. And you cannot say local news and local stories in this town without saying Isthmus. The iconic Alt Weekly is celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. And with me now to talk about this amazing feat and Isthmus's legacy are 2 people leading Isthmus into a brave new world. Isthmus editor Judy Davidoff. Hello, welcome back to the show.
Hello, thank you so much.
And publisher Jason Joyce. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Bianca.
Welcome to the pod, y'all. Oh my God. What a huge congratulations on such a monumental milestone. 50 years is insane. How does that feel?
Judy?
I mean, of course, on many levels, it feels great. As you say, it's no small feat to still be here 50 years later. And in particular, and as our cover illustration, I think, reflects, to be here in print 50 years later. So definitely a time of reflection, feeling good, looking forward as well.
Massive.
Yeah, I mean, without giving away any secrets here, Judy and I are both older than Isthmus itself, and there are many, in the past, most of our readers have been older than the publication. They remember like, oh, I picked up the first one when I was in college or whatever. And we all deliver the paper. We drive our own delivery routes every month. And one of my spots is Crema Cafe over on Monona Drive. And I was in there dropping off papers, and there was a woman kind of waiting there. And I handed her a copy of the paper, and she said, "Oh my gosh, 50 years. Isthmus has been around as long as I've been alive." And I thought, okay, so that's a little bit of a milestone. Now, many of our readers, Isthmus has always been there for them, and so that's a sign to me of some permanence and some real institutionality, if that's a word, in Madison.
Absolutely. I mean, you have the range and the archives to prove it. And you know what? Isthmus is now synonymous with Madison these days. And most people know we live on an isthmus, but it wasn't always that way. And I think that's right in large part because of the enduring success and name of the paper. Judy, in this month's issue, you outlined Isthmus's storied history from advertising meetings at strip clubs to working in the heights of the newspaper industry heyday to known nonprofit that you are today. For those of us who weren't here 50 years ago, I'd have to say that's me, or haven't been deep in the archives. What's Isthmus's origin story?
Well, I was not in Madison. I was alive. So, the history we know is through people who were here, including Vince O'Hearn, who founded the paper and ran it for more than 4 decades. He has a great story. He, went to school at Northwestern for journalism, went into the Peace Corps, and then ended up working for the Peace Corps in Madison doing recruitment. At some point, 3 years in or so, that ended. He needed work. He did bartending, and he did bartending at a bar in town that was a strip club, the Dangle, great name. But he was, still a journalist at heart and was thinking about how to create something. And the way he tells it, Ben Sidran, the musician, and his wife, Judy, they were friends. They hung out at the bar and kind of gave him the push that he needed for this idea that had been percolating in his head. And the first meeting, I guess Sunday afternoon, he was allowed to hold essentially a pitch meeting. This is our idea. I did skip one piece, Fred Milverstadt, who at that point had, he was from Madison, very good reporter and writer working for the Cap Times, was in the process really, I guess, of leaving there. And Vince pitched him the idea of starting this together. They did a pitch to advertisers to see, what's the viability of this thing. Will people buy ads to support it? Because that was the source of revenue for print product.
I love At the Dangle. That's fantastic. Also, he's got such a Madison story, the Peace Corps, being a brilliant person as a bartender, and ideas being passed about at Madison bars.
Did I mention cab driver too?
No, and cab driver. Okay.
And roadie. He actually toured with Sidran's band for a little bit.
Yeah, it doesn't get more Madison than that. And, Jason, Isthmus was founded at the same time that a number of other legacy institutions came on the scene, including WRT-FM, Union Cab, Commonwealth Development, and the Willie Street Co-op. What was so special about the mid-'70s to have birthed all these institutions? And is that original secret sauce still at Isthmus today?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're trying to figure that out ourselves. What was in the water in Madison in 1976? I was 6 years old in 1976. I think what it was is that, the counterculture really grew out of the 60s. But by the time 1976 showed up and, Vietnam and Nixon were sort of in the rear view, these folks were now young professionals. They were, beyond college. And I think they were trying to figure out how they were going to make the world a different place from that perspective. They had some spending power. They were making decisions about what kind of music they liked, what kind of food they liked. And in Madison, those choices and that movement were not really being addressed by the mainstream media. The nitty gritty at that point was a nightclub that hosted touring bands. These folks were not reading about those bands or that scene at all in the media that existed in town. And so they decided, boy, we need something that's going to tell our story. And you see a lot of that in the early copies of Isthmus where, really it was just like a write-up of what was going on Saturday night. Like somebody, Fred Milverstadt would be literally driving around the city, writing about who he ran into at various places he was stopping on a Saturday night. It was a much smaller town at that point, and obviously the group of people that they were really talking about and trying to talk to were, young 20s. They're lower to mid 20s. So in that way, it was like a little village within a city that, that counterculture scene really kept growing. And to the degree that we continue to report on that, nightlife is still a big part of what we do. It's still a big segment of our advertising, that arts and entertainment. I think our readers still turn to us for what's going on, what's new, what's different, what aren't we going to find somewhere else? And we, with our journalism, really try to push the boundaries on that too. We want to be first to certain types of stories, and we want to explore ideas, personalities, locations that other people aren't really getting to yet.
It's just really being of such service. And it sounds like he wanted to fill a gap for something that he wanted to see that wasn't there. And, Jason, I see you out regularly at concerts around Madison. Judy, I've seen you multiple times at different performances holding it down. Like, I can so see that. Oh, I saw this person. That's still kind of, it's a bigger city now, but that is still very much a Madison thing. And I do think I found it really interesting that the original conceit of Isthmus was to, quote, report and reflect on the ins and outs of the Madison entertainment scene. So I love that and that ethos. And I know that you all continue that. I'm going to ask a little bit more about that later in this conversation. But I want to hone in on the idea that it is not every day or even a common milestone for newspapers to make it to 50 years. And going back to that point, I want to ask you both, what is it about Isthmus that has that staying power?
One of the things that I don't think we really did necessarily get at in our coverage was the longevity and loyalty of some of the editorial staff over the years. I think a lot of us really thought of Isthmus as a special place to work as a journalist, that we had freedom and independence there in a way that we might not have at a different publication, that we weren't pigeonholed necessarily into one beat. We might have titles, we might be an editor and have certain responsibilities, but if we wanted to write about that donut that we really liked, even though our main beat was, city government, great. And aside from all of what, owners did to keep the, revenue side alive, I do think that there's something to be said about an environment that did really nurture journalists, good writing, good editing. And, when the reward was not in the paycheck, but it was in a very fulfilling intellectual life, really, and really being part of your community, that you were reporting on and are reporting on the people you share your world with, that you really care about, and that you sometimes, just have these perspectives because you're there, and then you have a platform to discuss and share that.
And it endures still till today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jason?
I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the product itself. It was, part of the alt weekly movement in the 70s. It's a free paper. You can pick it up a lot of places around town where people are going out, certainly coffee shops, bars, restaurants, liquor stores, but libraries as well. We're baked into people's sort of natural habits. You go to the grocery store on a, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, on your way out, you're going to see our rack there. You're going to pick it up. I was joking with somebody recently that for many years, alt weeklies were the placemat for burritos. And, we still are in some respects. If you go out, you're going to go out and get fast food someplace, and you're by yourself. Isthmus is a good companion to have. You can sit there and flip through and find something, that you like. And we've shifted to sort of meet those demands as we go. Certainly personals ads in the 80s, that was a big thing that people love to kind of flip through and check out.
So fun.
We have 2 crossword puzzles, which some people really like a lot. They can spend some time with that. It turned into sort of a tradition for my wife and me last summer to take the crossword down to the Old Brick Beer Garden and sit there and do the crossword together. So, just all these little things. Paper is still something that people really like to put their hands on and check out. And you can dive into the paper one day and find something that you want, and then you can go back to it the next day and see something else. So it's just this low barrier of entry type of media, I think, that still in a city like Madison, which we've tried very hard over the years to be a real reflection of what's going on in the city, people can see themselves or see something that really hits close to home in our pages.
I love that you said it. You guys are where the people are at, including me, because that is my tradition. When I go to Johnson Public House, I sit down and I'm waiting for my coffee and I pick up the Isthmus and I'm looking at it. So that is so accurate. This is so fun talking about this. Judy, I have to ask you about the legacy and how Isthmus has evolved over the years, because y'all are deep in the archives. There's so much history and great stories. We've touched a bit on the beginnings, but can you bring us up to the early .com days, as the early 2000s seemed like a really pivotal period for the paper?
Yeah, and actually, I mean, it's funny, Jason and I have had a little parallel lives because we both exited Isthmus at some point and came back. And I was actually not there in the early 2000s. But I mean, certainly just in terms of the content, it was probably some of the richest years, just in terms of the strength of the paper. There were 5 staff writers. I don't know how many, 5 editors who also wrote. So you can just imagine with that kind of strength, how much content we were able to produce and cover. I mean, it's true, going back and looking through the archives.
It's dreamy.
It's dreamy. Exactly. Dreamy, yes. So yeah, it was in some ways kind of the golden era of 60 some pages every week. And yeah, again, that was just the edit staff, not to mention that there were people who organized events, and we had office staff, and we had a full-time, copy editor, and all sorts of other support that, allows you to do more.
Launched a website that had a bunch of chatter and connection and community, and your events section.
It was an interesting time to be on the internet, not just because, Vince really let us stretch and grow and try new things on our website, that, he sort of trusted us to push the envelope a little bit, which was great. But yeah, we built this message board that, in the days before, it seems very quaint now, in the days before Facebook and other social media, there were these message boards, that was sort of based on like what AOL used to be. But it was a local gathering place for people who needed to take a few minutes every now and then during their workday to like check in with their neighbors and see what was going on. And that all ran parallel to the rich, well-staffed editorial department that we had going. So it sort of fed itself, really. And again, speaking of that like message board, that's something that the mainstream outlets in town were not prepared to do. Like, the idea that we would have user-generated content on our website. Oh my gosh, imagine the liability. We just sort of embraced it. And it fed on itself. It was immediate feedback loop. It took a while for internet commerce to really start eating away at the traditional newspaper business model. But certainly in the early 2000s, we were experimental and really successful in both in print and online.
Two sisters, two suitors, and a drunken wager about the nature of fidelity. What could possibly go wrong? Madison Opera presents Mozart's Così fan tutte, a delightful romantic comedy full of love, laughter, and true humanity. The opera tells a timeless tale of young people in love doing foolish things as various schemes are put into action. Flirtations in the moonlight ensue, and emotions end in a tangle, revealing it all. Projected English translations will make sure you don't miss a word of this witty and wise story. And Mozart's dazzling score will fill Overture Hall with sublime arias and sparkling ensembles. You only have 2 chances to see Così fan tutte, so join Madison Opera on Friday, April 24th at 7:30 p.m. or Sunday, April 26th at 2:30 p.m. Tickets start at under $25, so get yours today at madisonopera.org. Hey, it's Bianca, host of CityCast Madison. I want to tell you about something we just added for CityCast Madison neighbors that I'm genuinely excited about. Every Friday after the regular episode wraps, neighbors get access to an exclusive bonus segment and a special members-only ad-free feed. And I'm not talking about filler content. I'm talking about the stuff we actually want to say and talk about, but doesn't always fit in our regular show. bizarre headlines, wild posts from the Madison subreddit, mysterious happenings around town. We get loose and personal with these bonus stories as if we're just chatting with a neighbor. This is for the listeners who really want to dig deeper into the city with me and the rest of the CityCast Madison team. If that's you, become a CityCast Madison neighbor. You'll get the Friday bonus segment plus ad-free listening, invites to members-only events, a weekly preview of the best things happening around the city, and more. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year, and it goes directly to supporting the show and the team of locals who make it happen every day. Read more and become a CityCast Madison neighbor at membership.citycast.fm/Madison. That's membership.citycast.fm/Madison. And neighbors, look out for that bonus content. I want to keep moving through the history because you have a lot. This is obviously truncated, so folks should go and read all of the stories, which I've just had so much fun preparing for this conversation. I want to jump to recent history and the COVID-19 pandemic, right? It nearly shut down Isthmus for good, and that was something on everyone's minds in Madison. You ultimately decided to restructure into a nonprofit. Judy, what was the reasoning behind that decision then?
I think it was the alternative model that perhaps we were most familiar with. To be honest, I know there are other cooperative models, perhaps. I don't think we really ever considered trying to buy the paper. None of us really had money. We were actually all the sort of former staffers doing this kind of interim volunteer work. We're not from the sales side. So I don't really think that was ever a consideration. And also, of course, we were looking around and things, private outlets were just folding. So that wasn't attractive. But I think we knew enough about the nonprofit model. We knew others in town who had already, Andy Hall over at what was then called Wisconsin Center for Investigative Journalism, now Wisconsin Watch. We were familiar with him. I knew him. We talked to him a little bit. And the owners, former owners, Jeff Haupt and Craig Bartlett, were supportive of a transition to a nonprofit model.
That helps.
That does help. It absolutely helps. And really, there were two pivotal pieces to that. They did transfer, ultimately, the intellectual property at no charge. Also, Jeff, within weeks of the print publication hitting pause, Jeff did find a reader donation program for us that we had never had. But once, things were in pause, he went for it and we put that in place. And immediately people started donating, even though we had very content coming. We continued to keep the website up, but obviously with only a few people volunteering, we didn't have a ton of content. But people, I think, didn't care. They just really wanted us to find a way forward. And that was one way of showing their commitment to us. And we decided if there was a way forward, that would be the one for us.
And Jason, as publisher, do you think that decision ultimately was what saved the paper?
For sure. I mean, and it's what brought me back. I mean, we had talked over the years, once it became clear that Vince O'Hearn was looking to sell the paper and get out of the business, to kind of monitor this growth, this nonprofit news movement, really, that was happening around the country. And it just seemed more and more, as Judy said, like, it just seemed to make sense. And, the big bet was, would readers respond? If we asked them for money, would they donate money?
When you're used to a free publication. Yes. Yeah.
They did. They stepped up, and most, eagerly, like, oh my gosh, of course we'll pay. And, that's like the wind in your sails at that point. That's like, oh, we're doing something right. And, these are our readers telling us that, they want us to stick around. So it develops this momentum that helps everything. It just helps the operation. It helps, I think, motivate us to go to work every day, to realize that, like, we're not just throwing stuff out there and hoping people will pick it up. We know people are climbing on, to donate, because we have to go to our readers and ask them for donations at a certain frequency. We get to sort of level set ourselves. Like, what's our mission? What are we doing here? What's the most important thing? What are the the biggest and best stories we've run this year. What are we doing with their money?
I love that. Yeah. And it's just re-emphasizing why the work is important. And it truly, people came, Isthmus is beloved and for a good reason. And you can prove it for these, look at these stories that make a difference in your life. And I just love keeping up with y'all. And I can relate. It's awkward to ask people for money
Right?
as we're in our spring membership drive right now. And I know that, folks doing this work, we're all approaching it in different ways and different models. And yeah, as I mentioned, we are in our spring membership campaign. And so I'm just going to say right now, shamelessly, membership.citycast.fm if you want to learn more about being a neighbor, which is our member program. Support. Thank you. Thank you, Judy. And Isthmus also now has a thriving membership program, but it is still very hard for local news organizations everywhere. Earlier this month, Tone Madison stopped production. That's a blow. That is a huge blow to Madison. So
For sure.
Yeah.
And this is a question for both of you, but how do you view the role of community in Isthmus's work? We started to touch on it, and why folks should continue to support the local journalism.
It sounds like the obvious thing to say. Local news is so important, but we know this now. There have been studies done, these news deserts that have formed out there where the local daily has gone away, or the local daily, is just a skeleton of itself running wire copy, that literally corruption is on the rise. Once, local leaders don't have to sort of look over their shoulder to see that reporters are paying attention to what they're doing, they start pushing things through. I think a lot of that is playing out in the the data center fight that's going on. There's no coincidence that some of these large organizations are moving into small communities that don't have reporters sitting in on those village board meetings. It's vitally, vitally important. Madison is not a news desert, but certainly we've seen the number of reporters drop here. Every type of organization is diminished from what it once was. And so paying attention to that and holding the line and saying we're not going to slide anymore is, I think, really important, and what a lot of our readers have told us.
Just to play off that a little bit, I think we do see that we have a responsibility to be transparent and very communicative about where we are in our journey and where journalism is, because it's not really just our story. It's the story of local news. It's the story of, the public being informed. And if, I think that in the old days, there was always this idea that journalists don't talk about themselves. You don't talk about journalism. That's sort of an inside story. No one cares. Well, people have to care because it's about the information that they consume and that they get or don't get. And I think that we really take that seriously and in trying to talk about these issues in various ways.
And major happenings and changes in our country, and when news is being called fake news, what's real, what can you rely on, and how the media structures have changed and people are in silos and people don't know what's necessarily going on in something that's happening in their city, but they don't know about it because someone's not covering it. And I want to get back to y'all's work and give you an opportunity to share what is a favorite issue or story of yours, Judy. And I would love to hear the same from you, Jason, from Isthmus's 50 years.
I'll share quickly while Judy ponder. She has many more stories than I do.
Yeah, it's an unfair question.
No, it's good. One of the most fun things I have ever done at Isthmus is there used to be an amateur fight night out in Cottage Grove at this place called Neil's Diamond, which is like a bar in the middle of 3 softball diamonds. I'm not even sure if it's there anymore. But there was amateur fight night upstairs in the big ballroom, and I was going to write a story about it. And I talked to the promoter and everything, and I was planning to go down there. And my neighbors, asked me what I was doing that night, and I explained to him, and he said, "Can I come along?" And I said, "Yeah, go ahead."
Who wouldn't want to come along with that?
Right? And it was literally like farm boys taking their shirt off to get in the ring with a guy who was wearing boxing shorts and knew what he was doing. And they've just, beaten the bleep out of each other. And I was talking to all these guys and moving around the room. And at one point I came back to check in with my buddy and he's like, so let me get this straight. Because you are holding a notepad and a pen, you can talk to any of these people in here tonight. And I said, yes, absolutely, I can. It is the best part of this job. This gives me a pass to walk up to anyone, really. And that was a great story. And that was a fun one that people would bring up to me for many months after that.
That's incredible.
So that gave me an idea of a different story that I wasn't even thinking about. But I noticed that there was this woman, I'd say at least in her 80s, if not more. She looked like a nun, was usually dressed in a skirt, very sensible shoes, black coat, hat. And she stood. I would pass her usually on the way home. So it was around, 5, 6 o'clock. And she would be standing very calmly, kind of bowed head, right at the site of the old Catholic church that burned down off the Capitol Square. And I saw her so many times, and it looked like this woman is praying at this site. And I finally really got up the nerve, because it is very hard to intrude on someone's privacy, especially in a moment like that. But I introduced myself and I said, just really have been noticing you. Is this what you're doing? And it turned out that, yes, she was such a devout Catholic. That was her family's church. And she continued to go there to pray. She now also goes to a different Catholic church for actual services. And she was really the inspiration for the feature that we do, Snapshot, which, is kind of an attempt to just catch a moment in the life of the city. Not a full story necessarily, but 400, 500, 600 words that captures a moment or a person. I still see her around town. She has to be in her 90s. She leaves her East Wilson Street apartment, crosses over, goes to first this site and then to church. And I think she goes to church still 2 times a day. Just an incredible devotion. So that's a really sweet story for me.
It's an amazing story and speaks to the observation skills and people paying attention to what's happening in Madison, to have that, oh, I'm noticing this. Oh, I'm still noticing this. And to capture her story. That's really, really amazing. And yeah, you both observational skills, having courage, Jason, like from your story. I'll say it was one of my favorite things that Isthmus did was y'all used to hold performances at the Isthmus offices, musical acts. I remember Countess Penny, Noah Gunderson, Brother Ali, and more. You're talking about how important y'all's work is to the entertainment scene here in Madison. We touch on that a little bit. And I also want to shout out one of the things I look forward to every time an Isthmus issue comes out is seeing the cover art. You put a lot of work into that. It's very special. And I've even framed one 3 years ago this month, the April issue with the butterflies and the chrysalis opening up. That's one of my favorite things. I don't know if you all want to share about the work that you do in giving local artists a canvas there.
Yeah, it's the efforts of Tommy Washbush, our art director. We've been very fortunate that Tommy is really plugged into, he's a Madison College graduate himself, where they have a really vibrant art commercial illustration program. And he's really plugged in to the artists who are working there and graduating and then have gone out into, maybe they're working at Hebing or another design firm in town. And he has this network of artists. They're very supportive of one another. They're the ones who he's working with on these covers.
Yeah, Bianca, it's great to hear that you framed one. When you distribute papers, you sometimes run into people. And I walked into a bookstore and there were these 2 young women and one said to the other, "Here it is." And it turns out that she frames almost every copy of Isthmus, has it on her wall. She lives in an apartment, so she's moved from one room to the next. And I will say one thing with that, that was maybe just a couple years ago. I think she was just a year out of college. And then I ended up getting her number and calling her, and I wrote a piece in Isthmus Insider. But no, the one thing that I wanted to mention is that, there is this idea that young people don't like print, don't have an affinity She was a year out of college, and just, loves the print issue.
Analog's coming back. People want to touch things, including the grass and including papers.
That's right.
Well,
That's right.
The 50th is huge. You guys are naturally celebrating. It's a huge milestone, and y'all are going to throw down. I shared a little bit about your big 50th bash on our CityCast Madison April Guide show earlier this month. But for folks who missed that, how are you celebrating this 50-year mark?
Well, we talked earlier about how Ben Sidran, the great, jazz pianist and, former member of the Steve Miller Band, really had a lot to do with helping Isthmus get started, if only by just like pushing Vince O'Hearn to actually start the paper. And he's been a friend of ours for a long time. He's joining the New Breed Quintet, which is a jazz group that his son Leo, along with Tim Whalen, Luca Patnode, Nick Moran, and Paul Doherty, they sort of held court at the Concourse Hotel lobby every week for many, many years, and really, brought on the Madison jazz scene at a time when there wasn't a lot going on, when we didn't have jazz clubs in town. So they're reuniting. They're coming in from all over the country to play, and Ben will sit in with them. And we'll also have Mama Digdowns performing as well. And one of the things that we're in the midst of putting together right now is everybody wants T-shirts, right? And T-shirts are like the weirdest, wildest thing to actually get printed. But there's a print company that we're working with that's going to screen print T-shirts live on site that night. So you can, pick out the size of shirt that you want. They'll print it while you wait, and you can go home with a T-shirt. We're hoping to hear from some special guests who will arrive and show up that night. A lot of Isthmus alumni, we hope, will be in the house. And so that's going on April 18th at the Atwood Music Hall. And then on April 21st, we're hosting trivia at the High Noon Saloon, and that's with our good friend Paul Goosey, the king of Madison trivia.
Smarter than you trivia.
Smarter than you trivia, exactly. And so that's early. That's come on down right after work, have happy hour and put your trivia team together, pit your company against another company or your group of friends against another group of friends. And anybody who's ever seen Paul and experienced trivia knows what a blast that is. He's going to really stick to some local topics that night, so you can test your Madison knowledge against everybody else.
I love it. We've had him on to play trivia on CityCast Madison a couple of times. It is indeed a hoot and an experience. And y'all, this has been so special to talk about Isthmus and the 50 years. You mean so much to Madison, and really appreciate you taking the time to come on CityCast Madison for your milestone.
Thank you so much. This was really fun.
Bianca, we really appreciate it. That was a fun conversation.
That's Isthmus editor Judy Davidoff and publisher Jason Joyce. Definitely go check out their coverage of Isthmus 50, go grab a paper, and support their vital ongoing work in our community. And hey, I want to give a huge thank you to our new members, folks who signed up independent of this campaign just in advance this month. I want to thank Jesse O, Jonah G, and Benjamin L. Y'all, thank you for joining us. We are so glad to have you as neighbors. That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm your host, Bianca Martin. Don't forget, you can support this show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Madison neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. And as you've heard, it is the first day of our membership drive. And special to this campaign, when you join, you'll also get the custom felt CityCast Madison pennant, a flag to spruce up your walls. It's the perfect way to show off your local pride while supporting our work. But this is a limited time offer, so don't miss out. It's just $10 a month or $100 a year. Head to membership.citycast.fm to learn more and sign up. And hey, if you enjoyed today's show, why not share this episode with someone who loves local news and parties? All right, we'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, take good care and thanks for listening.